Hi, folks. This is Neil O'Horrell with Bear Cloud Technologies. I'm our chief architect. Recently, I had the pleasure of presenting with Cisco Systems Bill Radford and Rasan Akbar on a hybrid workplace of today. In it, we discussed the challenges and changes of working online and distributed with our customer, San Bruno Park School System, and our partner, Netreo. We hope you enjoy it. And feel free to share this link and tune in for more videos from Bear Cloud Technologies, Cisco Systems, and Netreo.
So yes, Rasan Akbar from Cisco Systems. Hello, everyone. We're here today to review and discuss a topic that we feel is fairly relevant right now, and that is hybrid or distributed work. Basically, the scenario that we find ourselves and many other enterprises in, some of the constraints and opportunities that we feel like that brings about. But without further ado, let me also introduce my colleague, Bill Radford. Bill.
Hi, Bill Radford. I'm a technical architect at Cisco. Been with Cisco for about 13 years in the federal area and service provider, and so I have a quite a few areas that I've touched in these in your in the in the industry and also within the hybrid work challenges that we're seeing. So we've been doing this for a couple of years, and it's and I think you're going to be impressed.
My name is Neil,
Mhm.
and I am the new chief architect at Bear Cloud Technologies, and I've been working in communications and networking for over 30 years. I've been in the VAR space, and I've been an instructor, an architect, and a a network engineer deploying networks globally for a long time now. Go ahead, Ra.
All right, we'll do. And I guess I did leave that out. I've also been in the industry for quite some time. Maybe not as long as Neil, but we won't get into who's older. Not right
It's
now.
all right, man.
But cool. But yeah, I've had the opportunity to be on the enterprise side as a engineer, specializing in install, design, some consulting. More recently, I've been on the partner side or the VAR side, depending on who you talk to. And I'm actually new at Cisco. Been here for about 5 months or so. So it's just kind of nice now to be on the vendor side of kind of seeing where it all happens, right? Where all the magic happens, if you will. All right. So, as we've been discussing just for a brief moment around some of the changes that are happening out there in today's world, in today's market, right? One of them that's big is, listen, should we understand that, the pandemic has hit us and, the different waves and so forth and so on. However, what we've been pretty, I think, delighted to see is that a lot of organizations have found new and flexible ways to be productive and work. So, what we recognize is that the future of work is right now, right? One of the things that, I think the industry or some marketing has kind of went into saying that the future of work is now and it's hybrid. However, we would then also say that not only is it hybrid, meaning that you have some people in an office, some people at home or wherever they're going to be, but it's also distributed. And the fact that it's distributed probably is a little bit more relevant to the IT centers in particular organizations. So as a quick stat, 70% of CIOs anticipate having to redefine what productivity looks like, right? So I think what we're acknowledging here, or what the industry is acknowledging, is that the work environment is changing and I would say that the productivity models then have to change to then accommodate that. So quick question for anyone in the audience. I'm just curious to know, so we've obviously taken some feedback from different CIO interviews that we've done and different enterprise interviews that we've conducted. However, what changes, if any, and any new requirements have you guys been noticing within the last 18 months?
Sec, I'm going to bring in one of our AEs, John Steckler. How about for some of your customers?
Okay.
What are the
Uh,
changes?
I think to your point of having to increase UC licenses to account for more people working remotely. I mean, that's the biggest thing I've seen. I think it's opened the conversation door to having more of those conversations about how are they protecting their home users. So we've had several conversations
Exactly.
about around solutions that would basically secure the remote worker more diligently.
Okay. Very cool. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks. I think, and it's interesting that we mentioned that because so what we are seeing, so to, I believe it was Mark's point, given that most of us that are technology professionals have kind of been working distributed in a distributed fashion for quite some time, for at least the last 15 years, if not longer, right? It's not necessarily new to us, but I think the thing that I've been noticing that is been distinctly different is that, not having that ability to then be able to kind of meet clients or colleagues in an office to kind of collaborate does then provide some different challenges to, to kind of coming up with the necessary type of results that we need towards any particular end. However, I think one of the other challenges that then comes about within a distributed environment first and foremost, and you guys started to touch on it somewhat, is security. So because we want to be able to provide the flexibility that then comes with distributed work, but then we also need to be able to secure that connectivity and those connections, right? Especially considering that a lot of the workloads have moved off-prem, so there's no longer necessarily the majority of workloads in a enterprise data center, right? This is all things that I'm sure you guys know. They're all in the cloud, or not all, but a good percentage of them in the cloud. So I think the other thing that we'd have to consider is that, up until now, a lot of the conversation just, that we're having or even within the market is really focused on the fact that a lot of clients have their employees in a situation, right? So they're working from home, they're working from wherever they're at, right? However, you do have some organizations that are talking about plans on having them return to the office. But I think what we can all say is that the office of yesterday won't be the office of tomorrow, right? So then we'll need a lot more intelligent technology within the workplace to then provide for seamless collaboration. If we think about the scenario that we're in right now, where myself and others are remote, and or I should say distributed, and you guys are there on premise. How do we start to bridge that divide such that the collaboration is still productive? I think a lot of organizations will be looking to tackle that. I think one of the things that we understand is that so we'll be tackling that with some technology, but then we'll also have to tackle that with some, let's just call it human ingenuity and probably some empathy, right? Just to make sure that we're being inclusive enough of everyone that's involved in the collaboration session at that particular point in time.
And Rob, I think you touched on
So,
something too when you said remote and then you corrected yourself and talked about distributed. And then you talked about being
yeah.
inclusive. I think in the past, what we've
Hmm.
seen is that we had those remote workers and we'd have just a sprinkling of them, and then most people would be on premise. And now what we're seeing is that we're all distributed, whether we're in the office or we're at home. And rather than talking about remote, I think that the theme today is that we are distributed and it is inclusive of everybody that's producing. Would you agree?
Completely, completely. Actually, and I take that even a step further to say that. So when we understand that, the distributed model is going to be here to stay, right? So no matter where you are, you're going to be expected to be productive for your particular organization, right? So then I think along with that, a lot of other organizations out there or technology organizations out there have been kind of talking about hybrid work and so forth and so on. However, I think we'd all be remiss if we didn't acknowledge the fact that we're doing it right now, right? So then, the idea is how do we start to help companies and organizations, our clients, right, move from surviving to thriving into kind of what we're referring to as hybrid 2.0, if you will, right, or distributed for that matter, right? I think so. Bill, let me ask you, as it relates to where some of your clients are right now, do you find it to be in different stages of this hybrid work continuum, or do you find them to kind of be in the beginning? What are you finding as you're talking to some of the clients that you're dealing with?
It's funny. Everyone is at a different stage, but we're all kind of in the same boat, so to speak. I think as you get new variants and you get new guidance from the government, it's sort of a what's next? Where are we going next? And are we going to the office soon? Are we going to continue working from home? How are we going to handle the uncertainty that we see? And I think what we're hearing most from from our customers and our partners is that need for the seamless transition from the remote office or the home office to the office. Whenever that comes, we need to be ready for it.
Fair enough. I think one of the other things to consider is that, by the nature of what we're normally involved in as far as enterprise networking, also then service provider, we tend to think of enterprises and organizations. However, we'd be remiss if we didn't also consider educational systems or hospital systems and so forth and so on, right? So this opportunity, or I think this particular point in time that we find ourselves in, affects all things, not just the enterprise, but educational institutions, health information or health systems as well. I think it's all being impacted, right? So then it's how do we collectively start to help all of these different venues, if you will, thrive, right? And then start to just move into then what we're going to be referring to as work in the future, right? I don't think it's going to be referred to as hybrid anything. It's just going to be referred to as work. So when we consider the actual workplace in itself, right? So then what types of, in your opinion, Neil, and maybe you can ask some of the members of the audience there, what things do you think are going to be key components, right? So then, you see some things appear, but if there's something that's not listed that you can conceive of, just let me know. Let me know what you're thinking.
Absolutely. I mean, when I think about it, if I'm working from home, how do I partition or separate from work to what's happening in our personal life, right? So have to have a way that I can securely connect to my work office, be productive with my work, and then yet at times shut that off and move on to my personal life and being online. So that's one big change. Let me turn it over to Susie. Susie is with one of our partners, Netreo.
Yeah, I like the point you brought up about working from home and then your personal life, because for me it absolutely blurs. My office is in my living room, so you really have to make those boundaries and turn off when you're supposed to turn off. Or I find myself sitting watching TV and I hear my Slack going off, and then I get up and go over there, and then I come back and watch TV and go back and forth a lot. But I think those are challenges that are new to our new environments. I mean, most of the people that have worked from home have offices, or they go to a Starbucks or something like that. For me, it's just right there all together. And and my son will be trying to watch TV, and I'll be in there working away.
Yeah, to your
Indeed.
point, I missed my drive time. I never thought I would say that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Listen to a podcast or something.
right.
Indeed.
Kind of that
Indeed.
forced disconnect that we're missing right now.
Exactly. And speaking of kids, a lot of that affects people's children, who are working from home, and you feel like you're not there for them when they need you sometimes, and then it's just hard to make that boundary. So that's one of the challenges that I've had in the past couple of years, COVID years.
Indeed, right? You have to kind of designate or specify.
Is this similar to what your customers are experiencing, or are they actually experiencing other things as well?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's all over the board. Some of my customers I will commiserate with, and they have the same sort of thing. No offense, but a lot of time it's the women. But yeah, and then there's other people who are actually in the office, and it is surprising to me. Sometimes they'll be pulling, oh, here, I'm going to pull this engineer over here, and he's right there in the office. So there's a lot of differences out there depending on where you're talking to, because I'm talking globally to people, so
Right.
everywhere you talk is completely different. And yeah, but you make it work.
Exactly. That's what we do as
Yeah,
professionals.
just touch on what she's saying here about working globally. What she's actually discussing here is a distributed workforce where they're really only separated by time zone.
So they can work asynchronously or synchronously together in this case, and then it just becomes a matter of those 3 a.m. mornings, right, where you have to get up and talk to someone on the other side of the planet.
Indeed.
Yeah, so I have our sales kickoff is this week and actually next week, 6 full days, believe it or not. And it starts at 6:30 a.m. because we have, PST, because we have people all over the world. And it's been challenging, I think, for everyone, but yeah, that global, it does open things up in terms of your well-being, I think.
And there's another benefit to that too, is that the talent doesn't have to be sprinkled around Silicon Valley anymore. Now you could be from Russia and be a superstar and be able to participate with Susie down here in Silicon Valley.
Remote worker, as I mentioned, but when we think about the workplace, and I mentioned some of the other things in the other slide, when we step into it, secure access being one. So the scenario where you mentioned, how do I make sure I kind of keep my professional connection, if you will, or work, separate than, let's just say my home environment, right? That becomes something that we have to think of. And then also when that individual actually is in a physical office, then how do we make sure the proper security then follows them in that space, right? So I think secure access is huge. So there we talk about zero trust access, Wi-Fi 6 and so forth, right? And let's not forget SASE. I think also secure collaboration. So we are Cisco. Yes, I heard somebody else say Zoom, not an issue. We know that MS Teams is out there as well. We do understand that. However, what we feel is that with WebEx, we have I'll say opportunity to work better with, like, say, MS Teams as well, right? So it's not that it has to be either or. We're completely aware that for a lot of our clients, it's going to be a multi-vendor strategy. I just think that we have some really good strengths and opportunities to lean into the WebEx platform. And then I think something else that we haven't touched on just yet, but we will touch on here a little further on, is that the digital experience then becomes paramount, right? So a lot of our clients are going to be accustomed to things working, period, full stop, right? So they're going to want, I would say the reactive model of operations and management.
Hybrid work is a whole new category. It's not just video conferencing. It really it requires capabilities from networking, from devices, cameras, sensors, collaboration. You need security and compliance, and really there are these non-negotiables. You must have a secure, agile network foundation. You must have secure, reliable, real-time collaboration. We're talking about user and endpoint security, unified location cloud, network management. And that's really going back to that single pane of glass where your NOC and your SOC can keep tabs on everything. Security threats, cloud and network performance, and also react to these, the changing needs of the environment. Next slide.
Sure. And really quickly before I move on, I think, one of the things to kind of highlight here is that, so I think somebody mentioned it earlier. So from an infrastructure perspective, some things aren't necessarily changing, right? So I still have my core layer, I still have my access layer, et cetera, right? So then my WAN, or if I'm using SD-WAN, what have you. But the capabilities within these architectural layers need to change. They need to modernize, right? So then we need to be able to move away from a distributed programmatic model of devices more into a policy-driven architecture, right? So that sounds a lot like software defined, right? So then how do we start to control multiple devices with a singular policy such that we're not configuring devices individually, et cetera, right? So then how do we start to have security policies built into the environment, right? Such that we're not looking at static configurations. Again, these are the new capabilities that we find are going to be more important, things that we probably have been talking about for at least the last 5 years or 3 years, but now because of, let's just say, the new constructs become more important in the next environment that we're discussing today.
Sure, and I'll just add to that. One of the things that we're seeing in these architecture drawings is that we have an extension of the on-prem fabric, and we're creating a secure mesh, and that's from the edge, the user, all the way to the cloud, whether that's on-prem, off-prem. Now, someone to mention policies, security policies. Now we can take traditional security policies that we have, let's say with Identity Services Engine, we can extend those down to the home user. So really your experience, whether you're at home, you're on your phone, or you're at work or in a Starbucks, the experience should be the same.
Absolutely. And it's really, you go in, and when we talk about seamless experience, it's you don't want your users or your customers, your employees to have to think about where, which tools are they going to use in which location. You want to make that seamless and really remove the technology from their field of view so that they can just get their work done. So let's stop here for questions real quick. Does anyone have anything they'd like to ask or add before we jump into a couple of kind of more specific use cases?
I'm going to call on somebody, if that's all right.
Sure.
Sure. State your name.
Eric,
Where are you
Tom, San Bruno Park School Districts.
Hey, Eric, welcome. So from your perspective, you're in a school district. Just talk about some of the challenges that you guys are experiencing and what you guys are doing about it and what you expect.
Sure. Well, some of the challenges I see is some challenges that we just had, intermittent internet connections, and yeah, delays and when someone's on Zoom calls. Those are just some, and then also some students don't even have internet access, so that can be a big problem. I think those are just some of the major problems that we see.
Thank you. And what are your communities doing about that to bring internet, to bring this distributed learning environment to these at-need families?
I think we had hotspots. I think, at one point we had hotspots, and now that we're back in classes, that has been obsolete. So, yeah.
And how are you tracking the statistics to make sure that the students are being productive and that the work that they're doing is validated?
Well, you know what? I think I'm going to pass it off to Tony to answer that one. He probably has a better idea. Sorry to put you on the spot, Tony, but
Tony Costa, San Bruno Park School District. So AT&T, which is one of the service providers in our area, and San Bruno Cable is also providing discounted internet for families that are having a problem getting connected. So once we went back, what's the evidence? The evidence is basically shows up in the grade book. When work is turned in or kids are completing assignments that are not to be done in class. So what we're looking at those that are having academic issues and then trying to drill down at the sites as to why they aren't completing work. And as work is our bottom line, there are all kinds of reasons why work is not completed in the educational world.
Nice. And are all of your teachers wanting to come back on-prem? Or are they expecting to stay at home for a while?
We are on-prem unless you have tested positive. So one of the initial challenges we had when the students were at home and the teachers were on-prem was the strength of our network, which we worked on upgrading. Now the majority of kids are in class. So we have kids that are on a device in the room as well as those that are quarantined on a device at home, which is basically our remote challenge right now, and getting everybody, whether they are in the classroom or in their living room, synced up and ready to go. And for the most part, we're not having really big issues with that.
And just one other question for you. For the students that have been distributed and are working online, how do you ensure that they're socially interactive with the other students? Because I imagine many students today are just missing that contact with their friends.
As I'm not in a classroom, I'm more in an office than anything else. The teachers are doing what they can to make sure that those that are at home are involved. but they're only at home for a short period of time. So they're coming back into the classroom once they are clear of COVID, basically. So while they're at home, they are primarily interacting with their teacher, simply because once we opened up the ability for students to talk to each other, learning went out the door.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
You can also answer that. Before I came here, I was actually teaching and using Zoom, and I used to put them in groups. Zoom had a nice thing where you can put them in groups, and students would collaborate together and interact together, and I found that very useful, where students interacted and got to know each other. And so, yeah, those capabilities definitely helped.
Appreciate that. And I think one of the things that you'll see is that we're able to, with some of the tools that say, Cisco is promoting, is that we can provide service level expectations. There are new tools with Bluetooth Low Energy where we can actually collect statistics. Let's say we're using DNA Spaces or a Meraki solution, where now we can at least look at the quality of service that students are experiencing at home. And then we can certainly look at validating that the connectivity is secure. And then you must also have some way of, like, a third-party source that validates the actual production of the students to make sure that what they're turning in is valid. Is that correct?
It depends on each classroom, but I would, for me, I definitely use a third party application to verify what they were turning in. Yeah.
So what we're also seeing is that Cisco, with using open standards, is actually able to integrate, as you see right here, with different tools to provide that service level expectation to the students and to your instructors. And I'll kick it back to you, Bill.
Yeah, and that's perfect. So it's I happen to be an expert in this, and not because I'm an educator or because I come from an education background, but when we have these non-negotiables in place that we talked about earlier, it's really the question comes: how do we build a network for hybrid work in these learning spaces, and whether it's a school district, public school district, whether it's a university setting, or even a research and development education environment. So the question is, what do educators really want? And we've got some excellent feedback on this right here. And you look at the Canvas and Moodle and Sakai and Blackboard. I've used all of these. I have a college student and a high school student, and they all have their benefits, and they all have their challenges, just like any tool. So with certainty, so what we can do is schedule our WebEx meetings and facilitate collaboration within the LMS. We have, we acquired a company called Babel Labs a few years ago, and then we have this artificial intelligence machine learning noise removal system that helps really isolate your voice and remove the background noise. And if you've ever used it, it's fantastic. And productivity, we have Slido, Miro for integration, and so on. So when you look at, we move to the actual hybrid work with a Cisco cross architecture solution. And when I mention cross architecture, it's really within Cisco, it's a secure agile network that's built upon that intent-based networking. Neil mentioned earlier, it's the taking that, translating the business intent into the network design. It's secure, reliable, real-time collaboration, which is driven by WebEx. Secure devices all the way down, whether it's a remote worker or entire collaboration rooms with multiple people for in-person meetings and secure remote attendees. It's that user and endpoint security provided by Identity Service Engine. Neil mentioned that earlier. Duo for the multi-factor authentication. DNA Spaces was also mentioned. And that gives us that, it's using the Wi-Fi network for proximity reporting, density statistics. And that's, the Catalyst Wireless or Meraki Wireless network. In this example, the headquarters is managed by DNA Center or the Meraki dashboard. Uh, Full stack observability, FSO, gives you real-time view into the health of the network and the applications. SecureX gives you a single pane of glass where your SOC can keep tabs on everything that's going on in the security environment. And finally, so one thing we haven't mentioned yet is actually it was brought up. We talk about industry standards. We have advanced integration provided by DevNet, Cisco Developer Network. And this could be through a code exchange, expertise of your certified staff, or Cisco partners that show you how to integrate all of these architectures for a full hybrid work solution. Get into industry standards for forever, and it's really we push the uh, the the evolution of these standards is something that we drive constantly. And all of this is on your terms at your pace with all the safety, security, and flexibility built in. You look at this and it's a lot of stuff. It's kind of an eye chart, but it's not something that is done overnight, and it's a progression. These are the stages of deployment. Next slide.
Yeah, really quick, before I jump to the next slide, I think one thing I wanted to add there is kind of where you were touching on at the very end. And that's that, look, we realize that some of these elements of the architecture might be more of a priority for organization at any particular point in time, right? So as that organization kind of progresses along their, let's just refer to it as distributed work journey, right? So maybe the initial, let's just say, instance in where they're looking to kind of do some of that modernization might be within their access layer, right? So we can begin there. We can start to provide that policy-driven access, as Neil mentioned, to where we start to move more towards a fabric architecture as opposed to a distributed architecture. We can then add in elements to provide enhanced functionality as it becomes a requirement for the organization. So I think, the one thing that, we do have in our capability as Cisco is to provide technology and solutions for all elements of the architecture. We recognize that there may be some priorities within an enterprise, within particular architecture elements over others, right? And then we can also obviously facilitate that as well. So it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
And I see two other value adds from this slide. And one thing that we're seeing now is that networks, or fabrics in this case, are no longer monolithic. And what we're seeing is more of microservices, where a lot of these things can be a la carte, where we kind of create this new fabric with microservices to pick and choose what we want. And the other thing is, and Bill touched on this with his single pane of glass, we have to deal with the shortages in labor today. And now that we start migrating more to a central pane of glass, a term we've used for a long time, but now we're actually getting there, is that we can operate these on limited staff, and it's easy for us to partner with someone to provide managed services, to have them take over and provide these services for us.
Fair points. And I think that's one thing to kind of to highlight, right? Is that, look, we recognize as Cisco, we haven't always been the easy button depending on the architecture of the solution. We recognize that. So I think, where we're starting to make more advances and improvements is actually in exactly what Neil just mentioned, is creating some efficiency around both deployment and then management thereafter, right? So then we've heard the industry and we started to kind of make some changes towards that end. Bill, please.
Yeah, and we are committed to the multi-vendor approach. Rob mentioned it earlier. Everything that we're making and that we're building has a robust API. We're committed to open standards, and what I want to show here is how we're calling it cross-architecture integrations, but it's really internally all of our products are designed to be open, programmable, and to work together. A couple examples. I won't spend too much time on it, but Meraki camera sensor integration with WebEx through API. DNA Spaces, we have the Firehose API that's open to partners. We have integrations with ServiceNow. Meraki has its own RESTful API and that's how you programmatically manage and monitor networks at scale. We have the developer hub for Meraki on DevNet, for Catalyst, for WebEx, for DNA Spaces. So it's really, the idea here is to show how we integrate our own products so that we're providing these hybrid work this hybrid work environment for you.
Hey, Bill, I think what you're trying to say is that Cisco, as opposed perhaps in the past, now today they play well with others.
Absolutely, yeah.
Do our best.
And playing well with others, and it's really knowing that and there are a ton, I have a ton of things I could go into, but I'll just say we know there are no greenfields. We know that we're going to see multi-vendor scenarios, and our products. I'll use Network Services Orchestrator is one that I'll just throw out there. Is it's designed through these network element drivers to work with several vendors, competitors of ours, and so on. So we're committed to making the solutions, the architectures available to our customers.
Right, and I guess, and just to finalize, the conversation, at least from our perspective, one of the things that we definitely want to leave you guys with is that, look, when it comes to figuring out what that strategy is going to be for some organizations, we get that some organizations are going to be fine with where they're at right now in survival mode, or just, let's just say, in a normal operations mode. We get that, right? And we think that there's other organizations out there that are going to be looking to try to add some of this incremental value to kind of deal with some of the new situations and scenarios that we've been discussing. So I think what we're saying is that consider us, right? So make sure that we stay top of mind. Reach out to your Bear representatives. Obviously, you have Neil there, and we'll come in and we'll do a deep dive session on exactly how we help provide a particular outcome, what technology we might recommend, and then how that fits into the overall strategy for the organization, right? We're willing to kind of put our shoulders to the wheel to kind of take that step, right? So just know that we're here for that. And that's all I had to say. Thanks, Neil.